Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Stag Party. I am your host, Sam Longworth, and I'm here with your other hosts,
Daniel Messier.
and
Brad Sear.
all right, today on Stag Party, we'll be talking about race, class, and gender. We're going to have three segments. The first segment, we're going to talk about race. And to lead this segment, we're going to have Dan Messier talk about an article named Privileged by Kyle Korver.
So, I wanted to talk about this because it's a discussion on white privilege by someone who is in the NBA. So Kyle Korver is he's a white basketball player in the National Basketball Association, the NBA. He plays for the Utah Jazz, and he posted this article in the Players Tribune, which players post things in this from time to time. It's just sort of their outlet to speak their mind on different, usually social issues that are affecting them. And so he wrote this article sort of in response to his teammate, Thabo Sefolosha, who's black, essentially being a victim of police brutality. He starts the article, "When the police break your teammate's leg, you'd think it would wake you up a little." And so he talks about sort of his initial reactions to the incident, saying like, "My first thought was, what was Thabo doing out at a nightclub back to back?" And he addresses that as like sort of the issue that we have in this country, I guess, and sort of something that he thought was an issue. That was his first initial thought was what did his teammate do to cause this brutality, which it ended up being nothing. The as he goes on to discuss, I believe. Let me find it here. I believe that the case was settled and that they found Thabo not guilty of any charges. So, which is obviously a huge issue considering that his leg was broken, in the incident, and being an athlete, that sort of takes away your livelihood. He goes on then to discuss some other incidents as a professional basketball player that if he's seen that kind of relate to race in America and white privilege. He discussed one incident with a very famous player for the Thunder, Russell Westbrook, that happened during a game when he was playing against Russell Westbrook. So Korver says what actually happened was that a fan had said some really ugly things at close range to Russ. Russ had then responded, and I think he yelled back at the fan, or got in the fan's face or something like that. And then after the game, Russell said that he had felt the comments were racially charged. And so that was just another incident for him, I guess, of racism sort of happening to his teammates and his colleagues, who make up, as he later cites in the article, like over 75% of the league is made up of people of color. So then he goes on to discuss like his own privilege, his own white privilege as a player in the NBA. He says, "I have more in common with the fans in the crowd at your average NBA game than I have with the players on the court." And he sort of discusses how even though he might support his teammates, and obviously stand, he says, "I may work with those guys, and I absolutely 100% stand with him, but I look like the other guy." And that was the other guy being the fan who had yelled at Russell Westbrook and said the like racially charged, bigoted comments towards Russell Westbrook. So he sort of talks about then like what his responsibility should be, as a white person in a predominantly black field, in the NBA being, predominantly African American. So he says, "I'm still in this conversation from the privileged perspective of opting into it, which of course means that on the flip side, I could just as easily opt out of it. Every day I'm given that choice. I'm granted that privilege based on the color of my skin." So that's sort of at the heart of the article. It's about white privilege. It's about how he has an inherent advantage in this league as a white basketball player. Going back to what happened to Thabo, what happened to Russell Westbrook, and just his interactions with the fans in general. And he sort of extrapolates that to talk about race in America in general, saying, as white people, are we guilty for the sins of our forefathers? No, I don't think so. But we are responsible for them. Yes, I believe we are. So that's sort of the crux of his argument there, is that, even if you don't feel guilty about your white privilege as a white person in America, you should be responsible for recognizing it and working against it. And he cites some facts later in the article saying the fact that Black Americans are more than 5 times as likely to be incarcerated as white Americans is wrong. The fact that Black Americans are more than twice as likely to live in poverty as white Americans is wrong. And the fact that Black employment rates nationally are double that of overall unemployment is wrong. He goes on to cite some more things like imprisonment rates for drugs, and wealth inequality, and basically saying that it's not enough just to recognize that. You have to actively, work against it. And yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty interesting.
Wow, there's a lot to unravel in there.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk more about it after this quick advertisement. Feeling tired, not making progress at the gym, want to have a sharper mind? Well, the people of Orgo Research have developed Shroot Beet Juice. This new formula has the kick of 5 coffees that will jumpstart your day. Go to beetjuice.com and use the promo code STAG to get 15% off on your orders $20 or more in value. Don't be slow, because supplies run out fast. Welcome back to Stag Party. We're going to continue where we left off by asking some questions. This is pertaining to an article Dan found by Corver, NBA basketball player. The question I have for you, Dan, is how is race traditionally seen in America?
Right. So according to Roger Smith, who wrote the book Civic Ideals, there's sort of 3 main cultural traditions in the United States. And the first of that is the democratic tradition. And this is basically our democratic principles, our belief in an equal opportunity and equal voice. And the second one of those is the second tradition is the liberal tradition, which is sort of based on John Locke's idea of individuality and individual property ownership. And then the third tradition that Roger Smith talks about is the ascriptive tradition. And this one is sort of how we play into race, because the ascriptive tradition is essentially the United States' continued tradition since its inception in creating second-class citizens. You can think about that in a lot of different ways, but it's basically the tradition of making someone second-class because of something that's not their achievement. It's something like race, something like gender, like we've done, since the Constitution was written. So I think that's sort of how race has been traditionally seen in America, is that there's always a group, it's sort of similar with gender too, which we'll talk about, but there's always sort of a group that is lower. It happened with Native Americans systematically, and it happened with African Americans systematically with slavery, and then with Jim Crow. So I think that's sort of where Kyle Korver is coming from here. Sort of the idea that these people are systematically being placed lower than him, even though that they make up more than 75% of his league.
So the scriptive tradition is still in existence today.
Yeah,
when it comes to America.
Yeah, I think that's what Roger Smith really argues with his book, is that it's inherent in our country. It has been since the inception, and it is now. Sort of that's part of who we are. And I think that's what Kyle Korver is trying to get at too, is that this, even if you don't feel guilt about what our forefathers did, you should feel responsibility for it, because it's a part of the fabric of our culture, pretty much.
All right, we'll push it back a little bit. How do you actually feel yourself about that statement, that we shouldn't feel guilty necessarily for the sins, but we do have to feel responsibility for our forefathers?
Right. I would say that I mostly probably would agree, because I think it comes from a place of, Kyle Korver himself hasn't owned a slave. He probably, hasn't participated in a lot of racist behavior himself.
Right.
But the concept of white privilege, I guess, would assume that he still benefits from people who did own slaves and people who do practice, racist, in the past have practiced racist, things, have, he's benefited from our culture, which has had this ascriptive tradition which has subordinated certain groups based on race. And I think that's sort of what he's getting at. So I do agree with what he's saying. Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating. And so this would also go with, people whose families immigrated here around, like, say, 1940, maybe Italians. They too still benefit from white privilege.
Right. So people, yeah, you're saying people who don't have that exact connection
They don't
to
have
our
any tie to
forefathers.
slavery or
Right.
anything.
I would say yes.
Is it
I would
because
say yes. I mean, even if you were to take the example of someone who immigrates here today, who is a white person, I think that they do benefit from white privilege because it's just the culture that we've created.
Mhm.
It's that ascriptive tradition that exists in the country that if you are a white person, even if you don't have those exact connections to our forefathers, then you are someone who might have an institutional advantage in the country.
because you're white? That's really it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're kind of like past that. People are hating on Italians. People are hating on Polacks because they're seen as just like
They're just white people.
White.
Right. I mean, I don't think that it. I get what you're saying. I mean, there's definitely other, bigotry and racism that goes around. So it doesn't, not every white people. I mean, I think Jewish people are among the highest, people who have hate crimes perpetrated against them. So, so it's not all about race, but it's all about that descriptive tradition. Everybody, in America has to try and feel superior maybe by creating that second class of citizens. But I think overall you would see a pattern of white privilege probably, even if there are white people who are discriminated against for other reasons like religion.
Okay. Well, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a short break and we're gonna pick up with class. All right.
We live in the scariest age of modern American history. Our leaders brought us to the brink of nuclear war, and many Americans fear for their life on a daily basis in our prejudiced society. Can you imagine a world where we allow our leaders to be influenced by Vladimir Putin? Join a movement of countless Americans to impeach Donald Trump. We cannot let him destroy our great nation. He is corrupt, unqualified, and frankly, a smear on American prestige. Sign our petition on impeachthecheeto.org. We can do this. Together.
All right, welcome back. We're going to move into a discussion of class now, and I believe Sam has an article for us.
So yeah, I found an article from Graham Cates, who works with CBS News. It's titled "Lori Loughlin and Felicity Hoffman Among Dozens Charged in College Bribery Schemes." Now, apparently, 50 people have been indicted because of a widespread college admission bribery scandal.
Right.
And this involved parents paying $25 million to this ringleader named William Singer. So what Singer would do, he would set up arrangements where, say, your kid was going to take an SAT or ACT test.
Yeah.
He would pay someone else to take the test for them. And there's also instances where there's coaches from Ivy League colleges like Yale being paid to reserve spots for these non-athlete children. And
those are like admissions people who are paid to do this, you think?
Yeah, admissions people too. So
wow.
All these people from different...
So these people, it's not necessarily only that they're using their money to get ahead, right? They're doing things that are explicitly illegal.
Yeah, no, they're basically abusing their wealth. And just getting down to the American society, how the class, how the rich always abuse their wealth and betterment for themselves, and always, pushing aside the poor,
right?
The poorest in their society. These people that are trying to get into college now can't because, mommy and daddy shelled out millions of dollars for this kid that doesn't even want to go.
Yeah.
They're just going just to get the degree.
Right.
And there's also one of these, kids that are trying to get in. They said that they're not even focusing on academics; they're just doing it just to party.
Right.
So, and then take this kid, say he's from the inner cities. He doesn't have the sufficient resources
Yep.
to get a good education. He basically is told, sorry, these wealthy upper class people,
Yeah.
they have money, you don't.
Yeah.
Even though you might have the grades to go, you don't have the right class, basically.
Right. And do you think this is compounded maybe by the importance, I guess maybe just the emphasis that we've placed on the college and university system? Sort of, it's become a necessity in a lot of ways for people to obtain jobs.
Yeah, and it continues the cycle of poverty.
Right.
So these people who don't have sufficient resources,
Right.
they lack the education to get a good job later on in life.
Right.
So they'll probably just be stuck on this minimum wage job.
Mhm.
And therefore, they have a low income status
Right.
in an unstable home environment, and it continues on generation after generation.
Right. And this whole scandal, I guess, kind of speaks to what privilege really is and what it does, in a lot of ways, because it creates that cycle.
Yeah, a never-ending cycle. And it's also interesting to think about how different people try to address this issue, and how people that write books like Looking Backwards try to create a one or united kind of class.
Yeah.
Everybody's equal. Everybody's under one umbrella. Individuality is kind of gone.
Yeah.
And it also speaks back to other people like FDR, who also addressed the issue of class, and how
Right.
the idea of pulling yourself on the bootstraps by the bootstraps isn't really
Right. It's the idea of a meritocracy, which is something that America is built on. If you're the qualified person for a job or for a position, then you should be the person that gets that job. But that's not what's happening here.
Yeah.
It's if you're the one who has the most access to resources, which could be attributed to any number of things that we've mentioned earlier in the podcast, like your class, obviously, but also could be due to your gender or your race. All of those things sort of give you that advantage and contribute to inequality.
Yeah, but what can you do from this? What can the American people try to do to prevent this from happening? In general, not just with college. Do you think that having a socialist society would work, or one that kind of views poor people in a better way rather than just lazy, dumb, not willing to work individuals?
Well, I think ideally the American ideal is one of equal opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily. I think that we do need to have a system of meritocracy where the best people are given the best opportunities. But I think the problem that we run into is that some people aren't even given access to have those opportunities. So I think that that's where a lot of work needs to be done, is making sure that every person who is born in the country has some sort of equal opportunity, and doesn't have to. It starts maybe it starts with college, maybe it starts with somewhere else, but has the opportunity to get into a college based on their grades, not their economic background, not their race, not their gender, but based on their aptitude for learning and their passion for it.
Yeah, no. So we're gonna take a break, and we'll come back and continue to talk about class, and we'll finish off from there. All right.
Let me ask you something. Are you hungry right now? If you're anything like me, you probably are. But if you want to diet, you want to keep those carbs low, you have to make important decisions. What are you going to choose? A lot of times, for me, you're choosing maybe bagel, maybe pizza. Well, I have good news for you. Come down to the Tully anytime, go to the Italian section and get the bagel pizza. You're not going to regret it. Bagel pizza, it is delicious. It is all of the great aspects of a bagel, all of the great aspects of the pizza, but the great thing is you don't have to choose. You can have them both just in one meal. Come down to the Tully anytime, 8 a.m. through 10 p.m., get the bagel pizza. Welcome back. We're going to get into these. We're going to keep going actually with this discussion of class and the Lori Loughlin college admission scandal. So one question that I had, I guess, was that if you're differentiating maybe between sort of the legal ways to use your money to get into a university or something like that, and the non-legal ways, like, do you think there's a huge difference there? Because a lot of people get into universities because they're wealthy and because either their parents or maybe themselves are potential donors to the university, and that's appealing. And so maybe that can be a way that someone gets into a university by using money too. But that way has always been known and accepted. I was wondering, do you think that is much different or much worse or better maybe than what we've been talking about here with this, what's most recently been exposed?
I would say it's the same thing but legal.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Yeah,
Merit should be the standard here, but colleges, especially private colleges, they're here to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So these people that get in who are undeserving, the only reason why they're there is because they're rich. But say
Right.
the people like the deserving poor.
Yep.
They are the people that say just lost their job, but they're trying to get themselves back on their feet, looking for a new one. They can't get into college at all because they don't have wealth.
Yep.
Even if the deserving person that could get in through their grades, they don't get grants, but they're wealthy, so they can afford these Ivy League colleges.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I would tend to agree with you. I would say that it is they are essentially the same thing. I guess the only difference being that one has always been generally accepted. You've always been able to to get in based on your wealth if you are wealthy and maybe a potential donor. What do you think a potential solution to that would be? Do you think maybe because I know when you apply to colleges they ask you your parents' income, and it kind of goes both ways. That's sort of to see how much you might get off of your tuition, what type of like financial aid you might get, but it also can go in the way of this person could be a potential donor. They make a lot of money. We could probably get them to donate a lot of money to the school. So do you think it would be a good idea to take that sort of question off the application process and maybe do something else to figure out a financial aid situation?
You know what? I would have to say it has to do more with the tuition. Because especially like colleges like Fairfield, it's a very expensive tuition.
Yeah.
And there's so many factors that contribute why it's so high as it is.
Yeah.
But for people to have a better opportunity to come here to get educated, to break the cycle of poverty, it should be lowered to benefit more people.
Right. That's something that we haven't even touched upon yet. The fact that universities are egregiously expensive already, which is already a barrier for a lot of people. Some people just can't afford that.
It's sad. It's sad to see.
Yeah.
But we have places in America where the average middle class white suburban don't even really get to see that much of in life. They might just like breeze by it, but they never really experience what real poverty is.
Yeah.
And so they make suffering.
And so they make assumptions about it.
They make assumptions that they're lazy.
Right.
But that's not totally true. They just need help. It's just sad to see now.
Yeah. It's just a fact. It's just a fact of our country that certain people are born without advantages that other people are. And it's because of what you mentioned that a lot of middle class or upper class people might have that perception that the lower class is lazy. But the truth is that certain people aren't given the same opportunities because of, like we mentioned, the class, but also because of race and because of gender.
Yeah, there's millions of people that need help, but they're not receiving it.
Yeah. Like
there's people that lose their job, and the only way they can make income is selling their plasma.
Yeah.
If you get to that point and no one's helping you, and we're living in this like immensely rich country,
yeah,
it's just disgusting. I don't see it any better from like countries like China who have poverty, or India.
Right, and there's absolutely incentive to help those people. To give them some sort of aid, because it would create the type of society where the people who have the good ideas, the people who are hardworking, are able to have the opportunities to flourish and to make this country better. I mean, if those opportunities aren't given out equally, then you're never going to have the best society that you can. So that needs to be something I think that we prioritize.
Yeah, and we also got to get rid of this mindset. Well, these poor people are better off than poor people in Russia, India, and China. But that's just
we're not in Russia and India and China.
Yeah, this is just evil to think about. These people are still hungry. They might be, look fat, but that's from the cheap food that they have to buy because they are poor.
And in a lot of instances, we all, I guess statistically, yes, we are. The poor in the United States are probably better off. But I remember when the blizzard hit Chicago and it was record low temperatures there. I think there was dozens of homeless people who had frozen to death on the streets. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, what poverty, the effects that it can have. And I think you're right. Even if statistically we are better than Russia, that's not, or China or a lot of other nations, that's not something to be necessarily proud of. It's just something that we should acknowledge and strive to be even better than we are.
Yeah. Feeling tired, not making progress at the gym, want to have a sharper mind? Well, the people of Orgo Research have developed Shroot Beet Juice. This new formula has the kick of 5 coffees that will jumpstart your day. Go to beetjuice.com and use the promo code STAG to get 15% off on your orders $20 or more in value. Don't be slow, because supply is running out fast.
Welcome back. Next, we're going to be talking about gender, and Brad's going to introduce his article.
Yeah, so I found an article. It's kind of interesting to build off. We were just talking about race with Corver's article. This article is written by Brittany Cooper, and she's a black woman. She's 37, and she's a professor at a university. And so her article is about kind of how she had to fight through a society that was prejudiced not only against her race, but also as a woman trying to work in a professional environment.
Right.
She feels that it has worn her down. Mm-hmm. And she points out how the mortality rate is actually higher now than it was 25 years ago for women giving birth. The maternity fatality rate is up. And she points out how for black women in particular, it's 4 or 5 times higher than white women.
For giving birth, like dying during childbirth?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no. That's something you would never think about.
No, yeah. I thought that was just like a thing of the past. Yeah. But I read this article, and it was actually it was pretty moving.
Yeah.
She opens the article talking about neoliberalism, actually, believe it or not. She talks about it as this big gospel of choices, but she believes in the end that it's actually just a bunch of lies because she felt like her entire life she was fighting to prove herself and prove her worth. She comes from a family of women that all had kids at a young age. Her mom was a teen and when she had her, and this was pretty impactful for her. She looks up to her mom and she appreciates everything her mom did for her, but she always knew, apparently, that she did not want to live that life. And so she claims that she grew up being a black, nerdy girl that never felt accepted by anybody in any group. And she decided to just focus on her schooling. And then when she graduated, she wanted to work in a professional environment. And she decided to go after a teaching job at university. And so now she's 37. She went through this whole process to get tenure. She finally got it. But she says now she's looking back in her life. And at first she felt like she might have won because she proved everyone wrong, proved her worth. Right. But now she actually feels like she doesn't have a choice or control of her life. She spent her entire life trying to prove that she does have control. And now she feels like she might not be able to have kids because she thinks it could be a life or death decision for her. Because she says it's so wearing on her, the woman's body to fight through a system like this, especially as a black woman. And so,
it was physically?
Yeah, well, she says it was physically. The stress got to her physically and mentally. She says she
mentally
feels,
too. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
She says she feels her body is worn down now. And so she doesn't know if she can safely carry a child for her own safety or for the child's safety.
Mm-hmm. And this is just by trying to prove herself throughout life, right?
Right. She says the fight to try to prove that she was equal to men, it cost her everything, cost her a real choice in life. She feels like her life's not necessarily over, but now she's stuck in this reality in that even though she has the tenure, she's alone. and she doesn't know if she can have the family that her family have been edging her to have for a while now. She says that she is the only woman in her family, only adult woman in her family that does not have a kid to this point in their life, and yeah, she's pretty impactful for her. She says she feels devastated to find that this system was all just a bunch of lies and she has no choice in the world.
So it's basically like, pushing a boulder up the mountain and then it's just rolling back down.
Right, it's the myth of Sisyphus.
Sisyphus,
Right,
yeah.
Right,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, she says she just really didn't want to become a statistic, but ultimately she feels like if she tries to have a kid, she might become a statistic, but a more serious one that it might cost her life.
Wow.
How old is she?
37.
She's 37.
37.
That's not that old.
Not particularly
That's-
old to have a child.
No, not anymore. I mean, back in the day, but apparently she says, we say back in the day, but it's higher now than it was back in the 80s.
I wonder, did she say what that? What
Well, even the 90s.
did she say? What that's according to? Like what?
She actually doesn't
Yeah.
say, which I found kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But
So it's more of her like personal feeling.
well, no, she says like in her studies at her university, she doesn't say what she teaches or what university she teaches at.
Yeah,
But
that's
she says-
interesting too.
Yeah, but she says this was something that she came across in her professional work.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's something to consider though. When
Yeah.
you're talking about,
Right. Yeah. I
the-
mean, you can find the article on NBC.
One thing that I was just wondering if you could possibly clarify if you
Sure.
if you know maybe what the connection that she's trying to make is. So there's this societal pressure that she has felt to
Right.
live up to,
Right.
and then there's also this aspect of the statistic of the black mothers dying in
Mhm.
childbirth at
hmm
very high rates compared to white mothers. I was just wondering what.
Yeah.
It
No.
connects
Absolutely.
those, yeah.
There's actually like deep cultural roots in this.
Yeah.
So for a lot of black women, or not even just black women, it's mostly in lower economic standing, class. But in the United States, it's usually with black Hispanic women. The mothering process, becoming a mother, is actually a coming of age thing for them because a lot of them don't have an opportunity to go to school.
Right.
So for her, she decided to take this route to go to school, and that was her coming of age process. But there was pressure from her family, expectations from her family to have kids.
Right.
And that she talks about how that was constant for years and years and years, and she kept like putting it to the side, but everyone kept pushing her. And then she also felt like there was expectation of society for her to at some point just
Mhm.
drop out of this quest and finally just have a family.
Right.
And she doesn't do this. And what's interesting about this is we actually, in Patricia Hill's piece, she talks about Maria Stewart, one of the first black feminists, and how she challenges black women to be independent and be strong. And Brittany Cooper does this, and she really does emphasize trying to be independent on her own. She doesn't really get involved in romantic relationships, at least she doesn't really address that. It's all about trying to prove herself and get this tenure at this university, because
Right.
that's the peak she's chasing. But Stewart also says that there's power in black women, and they can use their role as mothers to help create a mechanism of political power, and it can change the environment in their communities. And she misses out on this. She just feels that her opportunity to prove herself is solely in this professional environment.
Mm.
And we also talked about in the families how a lot of radical feminists feel like families aren't necessarily important. Like women don't need to have a family.
Right.
It's all about this professional environment. But we see in this article that maybe that's not exactly true. They should be independent and they should have every opportunity. Like she chased after it. She had the right to go and get this. And I think it's great that she got the tenure finally. But where this all ties back in is she may have cost herself the opportunity now to have that family because she does want to have that family.
Right. It's the idea of why does there have to be a binary? Why does it have to be either you have a
Right.
career or you have a family?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the society, I guess, pressures her to have that family, even though that's
Right.
not necessarily what was driving her at the
Mhm.
time. She
And
wanted a career.
She pushed so hard against that now she fears that it might be too late and she might be too worn down
Yeah.
to have that.
It's like a double-edged sword kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, that was enough for today.
Yeah.
We will come back next time and talk about other topics relating to America.
Right.